Everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm Isadora Rodriguez Legendre, and I am the Executive Director of the New Hampshire DD Council. I'm going to share with you all some best practices and things to keep in mind as we transition from one 5-year plan to another. So let's get right in. During the session, we'll cover best practices for moving between plans. Then others will share some real examples, and then you'll also hear how the PPR guides transitions. So for best practices, there are 3 different parts that we're going to take a look at. The first is to reflect and learn from our current 5-year plan with the purpose of closing it out and celebrating achievements, and then also using information that you've gleaned to be able to help develop priorities for the next 5-year plan. The second step would be to plan and align. So make sure that your mission and your vision still applies to the goals, objectives, and activities that you're looking to implement in the next 5-year plan. Think about engaging people in the plan. Think about what your resources are and what is realistic, and then create a bridge between the old plan and the new plan. Then we will talk about implementing and adapting. So just develop early implementation plan, but always treat it like a living guide. We know that things come up and we need to pivot and shift. During the course of 5 years, a lot can happen, and we want to be ready to take on challenges and address new things that may come up. Next. And I think that you'll be not surprised, but reassured by all the things that you're actually already doing as part of your new 5-year plan development process. A lot of the best practices that we'll talk about are built into that process. So, next slide. Okay, before we can start a new plan, we want to take the time to really see what we've accomplished, note what was completed in the 5-year plan, note things that were partially completed or not started. You want to identify your results and your impact. And you want to acknowledge things that, again, might have come up that you weren't anticipating that led to changes or the need to shift in the priority areas. And in some cases, not being able to start on a specific activity at all. And so we want to really think about what we've learned and not kind of what went wrong, but how can we address this in the future 5-year plan? It's something that kind of led to a stuck point. So on the next slide, it's really, really important to take the time to celebrate contributions and achievements. It is important because people really feel the need to get involved in things that are meaningful to them. And so we want to make sure that people are willing to support the next plan if they think that their work mattered in this plan. So we want to publicly acknowledge progress and successes, which many of us do on a regular basis. It's built into kind of highlighting achievements and story collecting and sharing information with members, partners, and community contributors, including, policymakers. And then we also want to document achievements for future reference. So we want to make sure that we are creating information that speaks to our successes, that speaks to our impact, that speaks to our achievement. And again, this is something that we're regularly asked to do. So it's not new. It's built into the process annually in our, reporting process. And then also when ACL and others ask us for success stories on different activities that we may have implemented. Next slide. So use what you've learned to shape what comes next. This is pretty self-explanatory. We're not starting anything from scratch, right? There is a continuity from one plan to another. You want to identify the things that really worked well with your team, with your council membership, with community partners, things that you can likely use again to achieve similar outcomes. And then also take a look at strategies that may not have worked as well as you thought they would and could use some tweaking or just stop doing it altogether. If it's not achieving what you are intending, then look for a different way to do that. You want to look for gaps or unmet needs, which again is built into the process when we do our comprehensive review and analysis. We look at what the needs are of our community and we think about definitely identifying goals, objectives, and activities that can help meet those needs, that can help bring people together to accomplish those important areas to our community. And then carry forward successful practices, right? What should we keep doing? We want to make sure that from one year to the next, again, there's some continuity, but that we are continuing to employ the activities in the ways that most achieve outcomes. Next slide. All right. The next section is about planning and aligning. We want to reconfirm our mission, vision, and values. We typically do this in the spring. We do a lot of our looking at the 5-year plan and what we want to implement in the spring. So we take a look at our mission, our vision, our values. We actually recently tweaked our mission and our vision to be more broad, but also to really identify the fact that we work alongside people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, which helps us kind of, confirm that that is what we are trying to do and how we're doing it. So over time, things might change, and we certainly know that we've seen some changes in language not long ago that may need some tweaking. And even if the purpose has not changed, we want to make sure that we are aligning our 5-year plan with what we've identified as our mission, vision, and values. So we also want to make sure that language continues to be clear and inclusive and reaffirms our core values. Next slide. So, a lot of times, in a council like ours, we have just a few full-time staff, and transitioning includes more than just staff, right? We want to involve staff early in the planning, but we also are constantly engaging with stakeholders, with community members, with council members, with folks that really have information that we would need to help guide our plan. So we seek a lot of input from people served, families, and other partners. We do use accessible engagement methods. We want to make sure that our information is available in multiple formats, in plain language, in easy read, and we want to be clear about how we're going to use the input that people provide us. So we do a lot of listening sessions and feedback sessions when we do our draft plan, just to make sure that we are not missing the mark on anything. And we really state strongly that it's the input from the community that is guiding our plan. So we welcome and we actually, address input as it comes up in real time. And then again, when we're developing our final draft of the plan. Next. We want to align timing, resources, and reality. Plans work best when they match real capacity. So I love to tell the story of when I interviewed for this position. The DD Council in New Hampshire had 2 full-time staff and 7 goals on their 5-year plan. Each goal had several objectives, and my question in my interview was, so how's that going? With which I was met with some, very realistic feedback about how it maybe was a little bit bigger than the council could handle. And so they actually had to scale it down quite a bit. And now we've used a lot of the tools and techniques for best practices that ITAC has helped us implement and that they've helped develop to really talk about. We're a very small council. We are a working council. Our members guide our work, right? And we have to be able to have very broad goals that cover a lot of potential things that might come up. And so we are down to 2 goals, which I'm very happy with. We have several objectives still under each goal, but it is more aligned with the DD Act. It is more aligned with the gaps in New Hampshire. It is more aligned with the realities of the capacity of our council, right? And so that's really important to keep in mind, because a lot of times you go in guns blazing and you want to just have a goal for everything. And it's not always possible to address everything in one 5-year plan. That's why we say this is a long run, right? We're in it for the long run. So make sure you take a look at your funding, take a look at your staffing. Timelines are really, really helpful. I love to back into deadlines because I struggle with deadlines. And so having smaller chunks of completing objectives and activities really is helpful. And it also helps our members, right, to have smaller, more accomplishable goals that we can celebrate along the way in accomplishing a bigger activity. And then avoid overloading the plan with too many priorities. Again, I think it's all in the wording. A lot of what we do at the beginning of a 5-year plan development process is we take a look at all of the state plans from other DD councils and see, what we like and what, maybe wouldn't work for us in New Hampshire from other plans. And we really pick and choose from, we learn from you all about what works and what doesn't work. And so we want to make sure that we are addressing the needs of our community, again, but not biting off more than we can chew. And we really depend on our community partners to be able to accomplish those activities. Next slide. So the next slide is really about that continuity, right? We're not kind of stopping where we end this 5-year plan and saying, okay, we're going to start fresh and new. And now we have a new 5-year plan and we're going to do all new different stuff. It really has been. So this is my a second time developing a 5-year plan. And it really has been kind of building on the progress that we make during one 5-year plan, building on relationships, collaborations, and some of those pilot projects that we're able to support, and seeing kind of what the next stage or phase of gaps and needs are that we can kind of help address. So creating clearly stating what continues from the prior plan is important. And then also identifying what's new or changing. For us, for example, we're not putting in a targeted disparity for this 5-year plan. That's changing. It doesn't mean we're not addressing disparities for people with disabilities in New Hampshire. It's just that we don't have a specific goal or objective dedicated to one particular disparity. And so that's how I like to kind of frame it for folks. It doesn't mean we're going to stop doing what we've been doing. It's just that we are going to change how we approach something if we're not continuing it from the previous 5-year plan. So, and I love to, help people understand it's all about getting buy-in from your council, right? They are part of the development of this plan. They are part of leading this plan. They are part of sharing with other people about your plan and who you are and what you do. And so it's really important that they understand why changes are made, and that we can't do everything, right, in one 5-year plan. So we want to really prioritize the things that that we need to, so that we can continue to build on those in the next 5-year plan. So we might say something like, we're building on our previous work in this area by expanding our project activities related to inclusive education. And then we might refine some other things so that we're not quite focusing on, transition as much. So those are ways that we can kind of help people understand why something is changing and why something might be ripe fruit, right, for picking. So like, I love to think about that. We did such a good job during this 5-year plan building relationships in this target area that we hadn't addressed, that now we're going to put it in our next 5-year plan because it's ready. It's ready for the work to be done. Next slide. Communication is key. It is really, really important that people understand and again feel like they're a part of this new 5-year plan. We want and it is important to us also to create plain language summaries. We did easy read format of our draft 5-year plan when we did our feedback sessions and surveys. We use timelines and one-pagers to be able to help people kind of understand what our long-term goals are and what we think our shorter-term activities might be in order to implement those goals. And then repetition. So we want to make sure that people get the message. And part of how we do that is just by being consistent on our how we communicate things. So if you have a magazine or you have a lot of social media, you want to kind of have the same message consistently displayed about your 5-year plan so that people kind of can have those takeaways, those little sound bites, those little information bites that they can then use to share with other people. And we talk about how everything has to connect to the 5-year plan. So it's one of those things that people on our council know that when they bring up an idea or, want to talk about a project, the first thing that they're doing is looking at the plan and see where it might fit in. And so that is like, again, conditioning. It takes practice, right? To just keep going back to like, okay, this is the plan. These are our goals. What can we fit into here? Next slide. And then the last stage is to really implement and adapt. So early implementation of the plan, again, it's really important to use any momentum that you have coming out of your old 5-year plan. For us, we have built a lot of good relationships and collaborations. We're not just going to drop them and let them go because we're in a new 5-year plan. We're actually using those as a stepping stone, as a building block for new activities in the next 5-year plan. So it's really important to identify in not just your annual priorities, but again, what the smaller chunks are going to be along the way to accomplish those priorities. And, again, continuously engage with your community partners and your team to make sure that you are all kind of on the same page and looking to reach the same goal at the end. So we want to make sure there are clear understanding of the responsibility for different activities. We want to make sure that we set simple measures of progress, right? This is very important so that we can have those celebrations along the way and talk about what our impact has been through these small, measurable goals and outcomes. And then we want to schedule regular check-ins. So the council chair and the council role is to ask, how will we know the plan is working? And so we do. We make sure that we talk about where we are, what we've accomplished during either a quarter or semi-annually or during full council meetings. We're constantly going back to talk about what our activities have been, how they align with our 5-year plan, and what our goals are for the next however much time we're using to implement different project activities or work groups. So we have work groups or task forces, a lot of councils might, to address specific activities on the 5-year plan. And then the next slide is really about how the plan should be guiding your decisions, right? And again, this is a living guide. It's not sitting on a shelf somewhere. We want to consistently, continually review the progress that we've made throughout the year. For example, quarterly, it's there on the slide. But it's about checking in with the council membership, checking in with the staff, with whatever team you have, with grantees, if you have grantees, just to make sure that the progress that everyone was anticipating is moving in the expected direction. Because if it's not, it makes it easier to adjust strategies when conditions change or when things come up or when you're just not achieving the outcomes you thought you would, right? And that happens sometimes. You thought something was going to work really well and you had everything lined up and all the players in place, and for some reason it just fizzled out, right? and that's okay. You can always kind of reframe and take it in a different direction. You want to use the plan to guide agendas and priorities, and then always document lessons learned along the way. This is going to really help you, again, as you develop work plans from one year to the next, as you report on PPR, milestones and implementation strategies and outcomes. And then it's also going to help you in the development of your next 5-year plan. I think that that is all that I had to share on best practices for moving from one 5-year plan to the next. But if anyone either has questions, we can have time at the end to answer them. But this is a great resource just to keep in mind for all DD councils and also for council members to really help them understand, like, what are the different pieces involved with moving from one 5-year plan to the next.
Thanks, Isadora. There was one question that I think you might be able to answer pretty quickly. You mentioned that you set simple measures of progress, and someone in the chat is asking, what type of measures do you use?
Yeah, so that is really going to depend on the activity, right? So if we have a grantee who is working on a project, we will embed in there kind of what some of our expectations are throughout the grant cycle. So it might be that, by month 3, you're going to hire someone and identify a cohort for a pilot project. By month 6, you're going to have a curriculum implemented and different measurement tools like pre-surveys and post-surveys identified and implemented. By month 9, you're going to be able to do XYZ. So that's one way you can build in measures, simple measures of progress. Another might be like if you're putting on an activity around a specific area, like a focus session on adult changing tables. We like timelines, right? So we want to have backing into the date of the event or activity, we want to have like, okay, who's going to be in charge of sending out the invites? We want to make sure that we get together a list of all of our community partners. That is one way to make sure that we're hitting everybody. And that is a tool that we use to measure what our reach might be, right? And then we want to take attendance at the event and see how many people showed up. Then we would want to make sure we have a survey available for people to make sure that we are asking the questions about whether the activity really had an impact in their learning more about adult changing tables and how to advocate for them in your community. And, what the laws are in New Hampshire, what the one law is in New Hampshire about adult changing tables. But it really helps give people talking points. And then at the end, when you have a survey, we have found that people really feel like their knowledge and capability to talk about an issue is strengthened, and that helps them move on to the next thing. But there are lots of different tools that ITAC has identified as ways that you can do, measurement along the way about what your impact is, what your reach is and how you are engaging with folks along the way. Like a lot of times, we also measure our success by how many people are interested in learning more about what the DD Council is doing and what they're involved in. So we capture that as well by having people, sign up for our email blasts and our information magazine.
Great. Thank you so much, Isadora. We really appreciate you presenting this information too. So thank you so much for doing that.
See, there's another question about budget transitions.
We might want to hold that one till
Yeah,
the
okay.
yeah.
Sounds
That
good
one's
to
kind of
me.
involved. Um, okay, so we are going to, this is Amy again, by the way. Um, we thought, and by we, I mean Cheryl and I, we thought that this would be a good point at which to talk a little bit about the 5-year overview. Even though we understand we're talking about transitioning 5-year plans and the 5-year overview is a PPR report function, but it has some relevance here. So we wanted to kind of point out, sort of like Isadora said earlier, a lot of those best practices you probably realized are pretty embedded in your process already for creating your new 5-year plan and then starting to implement your new 5-year plan, which is great. Um, it's a best practice based process, which is wonderful. And this 5-year overview that you do um, one time in one PPR is a part of it. This is how your 5-year overview is really designed to kind of help you close out the current 5-year plan on purpose, which was one of the best practices that Isadora mentioned. So we are not going to spend a lot of time on 5-year overview. Obviously, we're going to talk a whole lot about 5-year overview when it's closer to PPR time, so later in the year. But just wanted to give you a little bit of information so that you could kind of draw the line between that best practice and how you are putting that into practice when you do the 5-year overview in your PPR. This slide contains some current PPR instructions, but they're kind of restated here, so I'm going to go over this version. Um, it's a little more colorful and pretty. Um, when you are reporting, when you're doing your 5-year overview, which you will do for your fiscal year 2026 PPR, which is the one you're going to submit later this year, you start with your goals, so your goal outcome statements, and that's how you're framing your 5-year overview. And you're basically going to answer the question of what did you say you would achieve? And those are your goal outcome statements. And then you're going to give an indication about what it was that you achieved. Did you fully achieve those goal outcome statements? Did you partially achieve one? Maybe you did not achieve one. And always, we recommend that you use numbers to help show the impact and to give an idea of how you're measuring whether or not you achieved or did not achieve or partially achieved. And then, of course, this is your opportunity to highlight your accomplishments. What did you change as a result of working on that goal? Who benefited from the work that the council did? And then what were the results and the impacts? Then you also have an opportunity to explain any challenges that you experienced during the 5-year plan of working on those goals. And those challenges, there are many possible challenges that a council runs into during a 5-year plan. It could be staffing, it could be internal staffing, it could be subrecipient staffing. So staffing issues, funding issues, delays, barriers. If your state or territory experienced a natural disaster during the course of your 5-year plan that disrupted your ability to move forward on some things, that's a challenge. So you have an opportunity to explain what your challenges were. And then you share the feedback that you received. So satisfaction results that you've collected along the way from your activities. And then key takeaways. So again, what you know about the impacts of that project, of that goal. And then always, as a reminder, keep it clear. Use plain language, easy to read. Keep it short and keep it very focused on what it is that you are asked to put into the 5-year overview in the instructions and in the guidance documents. So, but we always share that you should keep it as short and focused as possible. Because remember, your project officer at OIDD has to read 56 of these. So she appreciates when you can kind of keep it short, short and sweet. Um, so we're now going to move into letting you hear from some councils about some of the ways that they're putting some of these best practices into practical application. So we're going to start with the Florida Council, represented today by Sheila Gritz Swift and Dr. Sue Cabot.
You can advance, Amy. Thank you. So Sheila and I are going to share the process that we used transitioning from our 2017 to 21 state plan to our current state plan, because that is what transition was completed for us. And we're going to talk about celebrating and sharing all that we accomplished during those 5 years, both internally and then to the public. And so we really started with our September 2021 meetings. We have a state plan committee that is made up of our task force chairs and co-chairs, and our task forces are each assigned to one of our goals. So we had 4 goals that had task forces. That made our state plan committee 9 people. And we met with them to share their role in our accomplishments. And then at our full council meeting, also worked with our full council to celebrate with them. And I'll give you a little more information in a minute. I'm glad, Amy, that you went to the 5-year look back, because the next thing is that we did create our content for our PPR 5-year look back from October to December. We didn't have all of our results of our activities closed out by that September 21st council meeting. But we continued to work on our PPR and update all of our results and our outcomes.
Actualizados nuestros resultados y las metas logradas.
From that 5-year look back, we created a
Mirando 5 años
simplified
atrás, hemos simplificado
we created a simplified version
una versión
of
simplificada,
our
más bien,
goals and outcomes
de
of our
nuestras
5-year
metas,
state plan and review
nuestro plan estatal de 5 años
from
a
January
realizarse
to May.
de
And
enero
then shared our ultimate outcomes and resources with the council as well as the public in a document that we're going to share with you a few slides down the road. And it took us until May 2022 really to get that simplified version developed and published both on our website as well as distributed to the public through a variety of social media means. Go ahead, Amy.
proceda, Amy.
So first we met with our state plan committee, and
Cuando
we really celebrated
celebramos
their contributions
la contribución
to the
a,
success we had with our 5-year plan.
al éxito que tuvimos con nuestro plan de
We
5
reminded
años.
them of the
Les
roles they
recordamos
played
que
in terms
los
of
roles que jugaron en términos de
invitations for proposals, scoring committees, selection committees, as task
selección de
force
comité
members and chairs,
jefes de
advisory committees for our
grupos de
projects,
trabajo,
project liaisons,
enlaces de
and product
proyectos
reviewers.
y
We shared
repasadores de
the large
proyectos.
number of projects we
Compartimos
were
un
working on,
gran
and I
número de proyectos que
appreciate
estuvimos trabajando y lo
the previous
apreciamos
presentation because we too had a large number of state plan projects. And in our current plan, clearly we do not have that many projects. 4 of them were collaborative projects. One was Project Vote, waitlist campaign for us, DD Awareness Day, and our legislative consortium. Our total investment over the 5 years of the plan was for programs $12,291,000, with the outcomes that would be finalized in our PPR. For the council, go ahead, Amy. We provided information about the goal outcomes, and Amy just talked a little bit about that. The kinds of activities that we implemented and completed, systems change models, research, different guides, curriculum and training materials, online training, and summits and strategic planning activities. Amy, if you could. So this is just an example of one of our outcomes. This was for our self-advocacy goal, and it was a systems change goal. A minimum of 1 systemic change to federal and/or state statutes, rules, policies, or procedures mitigating the income limits on people with IDD will be implemented, resulting in the restoration of their ability to independently control their income. And that was achieved. So this is one of our sample goal outcomes. If you would go ahead, Amy. And we were really proud to say that our council worked extensively to get a legislative accomplishment to meet this goal. We were able to work with our Agency for Healthcare Administration to get federal approval for a federal waiver, a state plan amendment, or other federal authorization to provide a program called Working People with Disabilities. And this was spearheaded by one of our council members who happens to be a person with a developmental disability who had experience working as a legislative aide. And she was able to get this authorization, work to get the authorization received. When we talk about systems change, we generally talk about a lot of time for change to happen. And I am really proud to say that now this legislative session, 5 years later, this was finally codified into law. And so that shows how long to get things, the task completed. There were ongoing advocacy and educational efforts for the council and other key stakeholders, and it allows our individuals on HCBS waivers to earn up to $550,000 of the SSI income federal rate and maintain cash assets of $13,000, way above the $2,000 limit for Medicaid. So we consider that a real win, and we shared that with our state plan committee and council members. If you would advance, Amy, please. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Sheila to talk about our report that we developed.
Okay, so thanks, Sue. Following up on the September council meeting that Sue has just taken you through, final closeouts from all of the council supported initiatives were processed and the PPR development was then undertaken. The 5-year overview that was developed for the 2021 PPR was then used to create what we called the 5-year look back Goals and Outcomes report, which was a comprehensive report provided to the council in May of 2022. You see the key organization of the report here. The status of achieving each goal's targeted outcomes was shared, and we also provided data that supported the outcomes that were achieved. In addition to the key areas that you see here on this slide, we reported on dollars leveraged for each goal, and the report also contained selected quotes from stakeholders supporting their overall satisfaction that related back to each goal. So that full report, as Sue shared, was shared with the full council in May of 2022, along with a public-facing document that was developed in a simplified format for both council members and the public. Next slide, please, Amy. You saw performance measures listed as one of the areas that was included in the comprehensive report. And we know that most council members only have a cursory understanding of the performance measures. So we did take a little bit of time to explain to them the importance of the performance measures and that they are required by GERPA, the Government Performance and Results Act, and that the performance measures are also elements that all councils are required to collect and report on for those purposes. Next slide, please, Amy.
We're testing Amy's technological skills right now.
Yes, we're transitioning to the Goals and Outcomes flipbook, which is the simplified version of this report. Okay, so you see the cover. Let's move us to the next one. There we go. So the first one you see here is for transportation. This was one of the 8 goals that was included in the previous state plan that ended in 2021. And there's the simplified, not necessarily measurable version of the goal, and then the outcomes that were associated back with that goal. We included the dollars leveraged, the legislative impact, and really tried to focus in on how it made a difference. It's the so what information and included the impact of that goal to the extent possible. You see here in the area of transportation the number of unique trips that were provided for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. One self-advocate, for the first time, an individual with intellectual and developmental disabilities had been named to the State Commission on Transportation for Disadvantaged Services, and 21 counties that were engaged in a new innovative transportation project that was hugely modeled after the council's original transition voucher project. Next page, please, Amy. You can see that for employment, it's structured exactly like the transportation one. And here again, focusing in on the number of individuals impacted through employment. That overall, there were 1,700 and I can't read it, 3 individuals employed, and then changes to the employment rate. We looked at the baseline here, and the baseline was actually established, if you want to talk about how long it can take to make real change, prior to the 17 through 21 state plan. Baseline was established for employment first in 2014. And by this point, it was truly reached and exceeded. So if you can just flip on through and let people see each of the areas, employment through post-secondary transition, self-advocacy leadership, the self-advocacy systems change that Sue highlighted, housing, workforce, which had to do with direct service providers and supports for people with disabilities. And then broad systems change. And under the area of broad systems change in our previous state plan, we pulled in a number of initiatives that were not completed in the previous state plan, but that were then designed to be completed in the first year, second year, in general of the next state plan. I think 11 initiatives in total were carried through to be completed in years one or years two of the current state plan. Okay, next slide, please.
Just give me a second to transition back.
Transition back. Okay, so everything that we have shared today from the slide perspective will be provided for you after this session by ITAC. What will be included there is the actual State Plan Committee PowerPoint that Sue referenced in terms of what we've accomplished together, the full council PowerPoint, both used at the September 21 meeting, the full council PowerPoint used in May, the 5-year state plan look back, the comprehensive report, which gets into the weeds with the goals, the outcomes, and all of the things that are simplified in the flip book. And then you can access the flip book either as a downloadable version from the council's website, and I think it will also be posted online. Next slide, please. I think Dr. Cabot and I have both enjoyed being able to have the opportunity to share this with you today, and hope that you find it meaningful and maybe you can consider something similar for your council. And when I say we and us, I must apologize. I was an actual council employee for 12 years, as many of you know. So it still feels a lot like us, even though I'm now engaged in work with the council on a consultant basis. And next slide, please, Amy. In closing, I know we probably won't have much time for questions here, but we wanted to highlight the key takeaways that we hope that you've walked away from this session with. And I just wanted to share briefly in terms of lessons learned, tying this back and then moving forward. Lessons that the Florida Council learned in moving from the 17 to 21 state plan to the current state plan was that it was difficult to effectively manage the number of goals, objectives, and activities, projects that the 17 through 21 plan included. So, to put that into perspective, the previous state plan that we've just shared today had 8 goals, 15 objectives, and 57 in total activities or projects. That's the 53 plus the 4 special collaboratives. The current state plan that the Florida Council will be closing out in September as they transition to the next state plan has 5 goals, 9 objectives, 24 major activities projects, and 6 cross-cutting supporting activities. And that refers to things like easy read plain text, translation of documents, communication efforts under 3 consulting agreements. Since most of the council's current activities and projects are systems change efforts, when the council conducted their 4-year overview last year, a lot of work was done in looking at where the goals, objectives, and activities were and what might need to move forward. Data was provided. That was part of the context that was then built in to looking at the comprehensive review and analysis and where they would be going with their next state plan. So a number of those, several of the actual goals will be moved forward with a number of activities continued to bring them to the full capacity for achieving those intended impact outcomes and then the long-term sustainability. And the Florida Council, I believe, has plans for conducting a similar process in September as they close out this current state plan and move to the next, with celebrating with the council, with the state plan committee, and also with working then after they complete the 5-year overview on again preparing another simplified flipbook public facing document that can be used with the council and the public. And I don't know if we have time for questions, Amy.
Let's see. I think there was a quick question in the chat that you might be able to answer. Jen Randall asked if the online guides that the council created, were they accessible? And then what software did you use to create them?
Sue, do you know the answer to that?
It is specialized flipbook software. I'm not the expert. I know we have a license that allows us to have a small number of flipbook documents available at any one time. But it is specialized software for sure. And I can get what it is if anybody wants to know. And it is up on our website. And as Sheila said, you can either look at the flipbook or you can actually download the whole guide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you both so much.
When you download it, it is not a flipbook.
Thank you both so much for presenting this information, which is just great. We love the flipbook that you made. It's such a great way to allow people to see the accomplishments of the last 5-year plan. So thank you. And
Thank
now
you.
we're going to hear from Jolene Sharp with the Tennessee Council.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be with you today. I'm going to talk a little bit about one tool that we have used to help communicate impact beyond the end of one state plan and continuing on. And in fact, this is going to cover this covers quite an extended timeline. But first of all, I'll introduce myself just briefly. You heard my bio earlier. I am the Chief Strategy Officer for the Tennessee Council. I've been there about 7 years. I'm also the parent of 2 kids with disabilities, daughter of a dad who's been blind since 1980, so lots of lived disability connections as well. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and continue on here, Amy. So I'm going to talk first a little bit about the challenges that we were thinking about as we developed this timeline tool that I'm going to show you. Let's go ahead and advance, and I'll talk a little bit about this. So you all know that by design, councils are intended to really kind of incubate new ideas. And that means that we might be a place where we can get things jump started. We can infuse small amounts of funds. We can start pilot projects. We can demonstrate that something works. We can bring best practices to our states. But what that means is that longer term, often the projects really need more sustainable funding and more resources to grow than what our small councils really are able to provide. So often, at least in Tennessee, that has meant that these projects, as they become really well established, move to a new home. They may move to a larger cabinet level state agency, for example, so that they can have those resources that they need to really become established and to grow longer term. So some examples in Tennessee would include things like Employment First and Inclusive Higher Education, both of which the council jump-started, but now live permanently with our state disability agency, the Department of Disability and Aging, where they have grown and thrived. Project Search is another pilot project that some of you may be familiar with for employment. That now lives within vocational rehabilitation in our state. We jump-started childcare resource centers to help make childcare for the little ones more accessible. That now lives with the Department of Human Services and a different department. under them. So those are all examples of things we started, but that in order to be sustainable and to grow and thrive long term, they needed to be with larger departments with more resources. So what that means is they're thriving, but let's be honest, it also means people forget where those projects started, right? No one necessarily remembers that those child care resource centers or that project start began with our council, because that's now, pretty long-term history. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So another challenge that we were thinking about as we developed this tool is that councils are often in the role of facilitating. So that means our role can be in the background. I'm not telling you all anything you don't know. You all are experts on this. Often we're identifying needs and gathering information. We're getting everybody together in one room to actually be rowing in the same direction. We're doing the work to help people who are all working on similar things to build trust with each other, to have a shared vision, to have a plan for progress. We're working through problem solving. We're providing accountability on follow through. These are all roles that are often in the background and aren't going to be necessarily widely publicly visible, but they're essential for our states to make progress on some of these key priorities our councils are working in. So what that means is often it's hard to take credit for some of this work, or harder to take credit than some of the flashier things that have more public facing results. So, and it also means that we have to carefully tell these stories in ways that are respectful to partners in the room, right? Who all share the credit and with whom we need to maintain trust, even as we're working through potentially some really challenging barriers. So that can be really challenging for storytelling, for talking about the impact of this work, especially when the end of this process isn't clear yet. So a couple of the councils that have presented have already talked about how sometimes it can take a long time to see the end result of work that we've been doing. It's not always an immediate process, and that may not always even happen within that 5-year state plan timeframe. So when those results are still in progress, those stories can be challenging to capture. Okay, we can move on. So I kind of actually already addressed this, that council impact takes time, sometimes spanning state plan cycles. And sometimes the story isn't just the end result. How we got there over time actually may be a really important story to tell. And an example of that in Tennessee would be the work that we did on building support for supported decision making and building awareness of that. We started out with a legislative approach, thinking we needed a bill. But realized very quickly in that process that there was really a lack of even shared understanding of what we were talking about. No one was on the same page. There was a lot of confusion, and there was resistance simply because we hadn't done the foundational work yet to get everybody on board with the concept and to know what we were all trying to achieve. So we spent several years doing very foundational education work, doing a lot of presentations. I think we have unmuted translation again. Sorry, guys. If we could mute translation, that would be super helpful.
I apologize. I would need to be assigned as interpreter so you don't hear.
Okay, I think they're working on it on the back end. Thanks, guys. Apologies, guys. So we spent several years doing a lot of education and foundation work to get everybody on the same page in terms of what supported decision making was, what it wasn't, and eventually out of that work, we built a partnership that turned into our Center for Decision Making Support in Tennessee, which many of you I think are familiar with. But that's an example of work that began and then took a lot of just foundational work before there was really any clear impact or outcome. That center was the eventual outcome, but we didn't necessarily know what that was going to look like when we started, and it took much longer, maybe even than we initially thought. So telling those stories can be challenging, especially when they span 5-year state plan cycles. All right, we can move on. So history can fade, right? We know this. I've kind of touched on this a little bit already. After a project or a state plan cycle is over, what happens to all of the stories that were contained in that state plan and the reporting that we did and the annual reports that we produced? How do we make sure we don't lose those stories of the work that we did and the impact that often continues for decades after that really was a primary focus for our council? And how do we communicate that lasting impact beyond just the shorter term time when it is the focus? And I think critically, we're at a time now where we're all wrestling a little bit with how do we make sure that we're carrying forward the lessons of the past so we don't lose the context for how we got where we are, why that matters, and how it can help direct the work that we're continuing to do into the future. So our council landed on one solution, though it's not the only one. We can move forward. So we decided that one of the best ways we could come up with to not lose some of that historical impact, to not lose some of the context of the work that our council has been doing for 15 years now would actually make sense in a timeline format. And we touched on this a little bit. Isadora touched on this when she was talking about best practices. Timeline was mentioned as one of the ways that we can communicate that information as we transition from one state plan to another. So I'm going to show you a little bit of what this looks like. This timeline lives on our website. So this is kind of a broad view. And again, you can go directly to our website. I can drop the URL in the chat here in a moment to share that with you. So you can go directly to the website and kind of spend some time looking at this for yourself if you're interested. But you can see that the basic layout is very simple. It uses tabs, and those are divided by decades. And it gives then a chronological list of some really key milestones and outcomes for our work over 50 years. Okay, we can go move on. So you'll see here that it starts with our establishment. So it goes all the way back to the very beginning. So what this means is we have one place where that whole trajectory of work over our history can be captured in a way that's browsable, that can use hyperlinks. And you'll see that sometimes we're linking to external resources, things like other partner websites, or sometimes it's actually internal resources. It's a place where brochures that we produced, or flyers that were disseminated, or magazine articles that we produced that focused on this work can live permanently, not be lost in all of the archived content going back 50 years, which obviously most people aren't going to be able to wade through. Okay, we can move on. So the most recent years offer more detail about projects. So you'll see here some of the more recent projects have a little bit more that lives there. As time goes on, that may end up getting more condensed as we add newer projects. But it just gives us a place to capture some of these resources. And the other great benefit of this is that it allows us to really keep our current priorities tab on our website, which you'll see down there in the bottom right corner of your screen. We really just have two current priorities that are listed to keep updating on ongoing work. That's not that those are the only things they're working on, but we're working on, but they're kind of our two buckets of current most active work that allows us to keep that menu really simple. And not list a whole ton of priorities that people can get lost in, but not lose the context for projects that are still very relevant. And we find we're often still pointing people to, for example, information about adult-sized changing tables, which if you attended when our executive director, Lauren Piercy, presented about, you heard about that work. And I know many of you are now working in that area. So that continues to be relevant. We want to be able to link people to some of that information, but because it's not a current priority, it means we don't have to keep it living in that, we don't have to keep it listed under that current priorities section of our website. Okay, we can move on. So there are a few other ways that we tell some of these long-term stories where we capture the trajectory of change that often spans more than one, sometimes several state plans. And Breaking Ground is our quarterly magazine. That is one important place that we do that, because a magazine can allow you, that format can allow you in articles to tell stories that are, for example, where are they now features. We did one a couple years ago, about the very first inclusive higher ed graduates in Tennessee. So it's kind of it gives you an opportunity to look a little bit further back than you're probably going to do in more current comms outlets like newsletter, email newsletters, things like that. We did an issue that was a 30th anniversary feature on partners in policymaking, which continues to be a really core program for us here. We've done an update on those childcare resource centers that I mentioned earlier, just kind of talking about their current work. But again, grounding people in, hey, this was a project we started all those years ago that's continuing to have an impact in our state. All right, we can move on. So this also helps us tell stories as we're orienting new council members, right? Because when a new council member is coming on, they're still trying to get an understanding of what their role really is and how they can be effective. So telling stories of these past projects that were often led by previous council members is a really good way for us to show them. So we're not just explaining what your role is, but we're showing you all of the ways that can look and has looked over the past. So we tell those past stories from the timeline through the lens of how a council member was leading that work, or how they were the trigger for us understanding a new issue. Adult size changing tables is a great example of that. We never would have known that was something we needed to be working on without a council member bringing us their lived experience, which is the vision for how this is supposed to work. So we use that timeline of projects to tell those stories of how council members prompt the work that we do, how they lead the work that we do. There are examples on your screen of council members working on making state parks more accessible, on safety and vehicle stops, a bill signing there from one of our members, of funding for additional inclusive higher ed programs at a new college campus in our state that was led by a council member who worked there. So those are just examples of how we pull stories from those timelines to give new council members an orientation in what this really looks like. Practically, how do I bring my lived experience in a way that helps lead change in our state? And hopefully the message that comes through loud and clear through looking at that timeline and seeing our impact and seeing the role that council members play in that is that through the council, that lived experience becomes lasting change. All right, I think that's it for me.
Thank you, Jolene. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'll look through the chat and see if there are any questions here. I can answer them in the chat or live.
Great, thank you. I didn't see anything in the chat, but if anything pops up, if you want to put answers in, that'd be great. Chelsea, if you are ready, she's going to talk about what they do in Alaska.
Yes, thanks so much. And I want to be mindful of time. Do we only have 10 minutes?
Yes, we have about 10 minutes.
Okay, I'll go as fast as I can. So hi, everyone. My name is Chelsea Burke. Today I'm going to walk you through how our transition has been going to our new 5-year state plan, what we tried, where it didn't land, and what we have changed as a result. This is less about the plan itself and more about our process behind it, especially how we've been working to build understanding and trust with our council through the process. Next slide. Before I jump in, oh, you can go back one. Thanks. Before I jump in to the plan itself, I want to start with some context because this really shaped our experience. We're currently navigating a leadership transition and at the same time introducing a completely new 5-year state plan structure. So, you always hear don't change all things at once. Unfortunately, timing was not on our side and we kind of had to. So it wasn't just a content update, it was itself a systems change for us. From a staff perspective, this structure was designed to reduce burden and better align with federal reporting requirements, make things easier and efficient. But from a council perspective, it was a lot of change at once. And next slide. So the shift that we made, we've simplified everything. We moved from multiple goals to a single goal. We shifted to plain language wherever we could and have options to provide plain language. We designed flexible work plans so we could respond to changing needs every year. This made sense structurally, especially for staff, but we hadn't tested it yet with how it would land for the council. Next slide. This visual helped show the shift from multiple disconnected goals to one shared direction with organized objectives underneath. This graphic was really helpful conceptually, but understanding the structure didn't automatically mean understanding the work. Next slide. When we presented the plan visually and in plain language, we did so it felt accessible and easy to follow. These are actual screenshots of the slides that we used when we presented the plan. And our goal was clarity without overwhelming detail. But some people, or it's something that people could understand quickly at a high level. Excuse me. Next slide. We also created a one-pager to break things down further. And these are some screen shares of the actual one-pager. This helped show the single goal as our direction, the objectives as what we do, and it reminded them that the work plans were where the detailed activities live. So instead of adding complexity, we tried to layer communication. And next slide. This is where things got interesting. We had very mixed feedback. Some council members really appreciated the plain language. It felt clear and accessible. Others felt it was very vague and wanted more detail. What they were really asking us was, what does this look like in practice? What are staff doing day to day? And how do these objectives turn into real work? And we realized it wasn't resistance. It was a signal that we hadn't fully connected the dots between the plan and the work. Next slide. Well, what we learned is staff live in this system every day, and system by meaning the actual work that we're doing. And the council members, while their lived experience is what guides us, they don't do this work every day. When we simplified the language, we removed some clear context. Council members rely on that to understand our work. And that was a big shift in perspective for us. Next slide. So what did we do? Our first response was to add back in more detail, provide additional versions of materials. For example, a full plan, draft objectives, and activities not in plain language. That helped, but it didn't fully solve the issue. Next slide. So our real solution was education and communication, creating trust. This really stood out. The need wasn't just a better plan, it was understanding. How we shifted from asking, how do we explain this plan better, to how do we help council members understand the full system this plan lives in? And that includes how the 5-year plan connects to work plans, how work plans connect to our reporting, and how the staff actually carry out that work day to day. And that was where trust was built. Next slide. So what we implemented, instead of focusing only on the plan, we built a system to support understanding and engagement through trainings, monthly updates, office hours, and ongoing engagement. So catching up here, we introduced short 30-minute trainings happening once a month. We didn't reinvent anything. We used ITAC resources and existing council documents, adapted them into plain language. Topics included council roles, which was an orientation refresher, 5-year plan and reporting, governance, rules of order, work plan development, and Open Meetings Act, which we actually did Tuesday. Next slide. We also started monthly staff updates, just a few sentences per person about what they are working on currently. And we put it into an update and email it out in an accessible format. This helped council members see the work that was happening between meetings and better understand how the plan connects to real activities. Next slide. One other thing that we're discussing is implementing an office hour or coffee talk. So we think about the ITAC office hours. So similar to that, just 1 hour a month where council members can join, ask questions, or just connect. Most importantly, we would then share the Q&A with the full council following the meeting, just like the ITAC FAQ emails. So information isn't siloed. And we also had to rethink how we use our time together. 3 meetings a year is not enough to build engagement or understanding. So we prioritized council business in our agendas, added 5-year plan work sessions through to our committee meetings, which happen monthly, and created more touch points throughout the year with our updates, the trainings, and the other things that we have in the works. So for example, our committees reviewed our draft work plan activities before full council approval. And not everyone wants that same level of detail, and that's okay. The goal is to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to engage. Now, here's the reality check, the really important thing that I want to emphasize. Alaska ranks as the 48th least populous state, but is also the largest US state by total area. Our geographic disbursement is a huge barrier. We are a minimum allotment council. We didn't add funding, staff, or complex systems. What we did was education plus communication equals trust. We kept it simple, consistent, small actions repeated over time, and it's working. So if I had to summarize, a strong plan isn't just written well, it's understood well. And these were our 5 key takeaways so far in the process. And I don't think we have time for any Q&A. So I'll just go to the last slide. And thank you so much for having me.
We do actually have a couple of minutes. So if anybody has any questions for Chelsea or for any of the other presenters who have spoken, if you have any questions, now's a great time to ask. I'm going to stop the share and you can put anything in the chat, or if you want to come off mute and ask a question, you certainly can do that as well.